6 million people bought the issue where Superman stopped breathing. Fans paid 50 cents per call to vote a teenage Robin into a grave. The fastest man alive ran faster than light, until his body disintegrated and no one could even recover what was left. A 10-year-old died calling for his father, who arrived too late to do anything but hold the body. And one woman was murdered in her living room, and the investigation revealed her friends had been monsters all along. These deaths weren't designed to feel heroic. They were designed to hurt, and they still do. Superman. Superman died in 1992, and what made it painful wasn't just losing him. It was watching him lose. To understand why this death devastated readers, you have to understand that Superman wasn't supposed to be beatable. He'd been the symbol of hope since 1938, the hero who always found a way, the man who made the impossible possible. And then DC introduced Doomsday, a creature with no origin, no motivation, and no plan beyond destruction, and let him do what 50 years of villains couldn't. Behind the scenes, the death happened because of a scheduling conflict. DC had been building toward the marriage of Clark Kent and Lois Lane, but Warner Brothers launched the television series Lois and Clark and wanted that storyline for themselves. Editor Mike Carlin suddenly had a gap where his biggest story was supposed to go, and his solution was to kill Superman instead. The most painful death in DC history was born from a TV network's marketing decision, but the creative team made it hurt in ways no one expected. The storytelling used a technique that amplified dread with every issue. The panel counts decreased as Doomsday got closer to Metropolis, building momentum until Superman number 75 consisted entirely of splash pages, one devastating blow per page. No escape, no clever solution, just two beings beating each other to death while the city crumbled around them. What makes this death linger is the failure it represents. Superman didn't sacrifice himself to save the world from an ultimate threat. He died in a street fight because nothing else worked. The Justice League had already tried and failed. The military had tried and failed. There was no plan, no strategy, just Superman throwing himself at an unstoppable force until both of them broke. Lois Lane held him as he died. Ma and Pa Kent watched on television from Smallville as their son gave everything, and it still wasn't enough. The pain came from watching the most powerful hero in comics reduced to desperation, fighting not because he could win but because no one else was left. This follows a pattern in tragic storytelling where the most devastating losses come from stripping away hope gradually. Readers didn't just see Superman die, they watched him realize he might not survive, then accept that he probably wouldn't, then choose to keep fighting anyway. The death forced audiences to sit with something they'd never had to consider. What happens when Superman can't save himself? Superman returned within a year, because DC was never going to leave their flagship character dead. But for that brief window, readers experienced something the comics had protected them from for over 50 years, a world without Superman, and the grief of everyone he'd left behind. Jason Todd. DC killed Robin because fans paid 50 cents per call to vote for his death. And what makes this painful isn't just how he died, it's knowing that readers chose to let it happen. In 1988, DC set up two 1-900 numbers and gave readers 36 hours to decide whether the second Robin lived or died. The vote came in at 5,343 to 5,271. 72 calls, out of over 10,000, decided that Jason Todd would die in a warehouse, beaten by the Joker, abandoned by the audience that was supposed to root for him. To understand the cruelty of this, you have to understand why readers hated Jason. After Crisis on Infinite Earths, DC reimagined him as a street kid who tried to steal the Batmobile's tires, angry, rebellious, and defiant in ways that readers found annoying rather than compelling. Letters poured into DC demanding they get rid of him. Editor Dennis O'Neil saw an opportunity. What if they let the audience decide? Behind the scenes, DC's executives assumed readers would vote for life. They prepared two versions of Batman number 428, one where Jason survives, one where he dies. Mark Waid later noted the company had misplaced faith in the goodness of human nature. Writer Jim Starlin constructed a trap designed for maximum cruelty. Jason discovers his mother wasn't his biological parent and tracks his real mom to Ethiopia. He finds her. She seems kind. She's working as an aid worker. And then she betrays him to the Joker to protect herself, handing her own son over to a psychopath. The Joker beats Jason with a crowbar. The panels don't cut away. Readers see every swing, hear Jason's pain, watch the Joker laugh while a teenager bleeds on the floor. Then the Joker leaves him in the warehouse and triggers a bomb. Batman arrives seconds too late. The warehouse explodes. Jason dies in the rubble, reaching toward the door his father couldn't get through in time. This follows a pattern in tragedy where betrayal compounds loss. Jason wasn't just murdered. He was betrayed by his mother, abandoned by readers, and failed by the one person who was supposed to protect him. The death worked because it was unfair in every possible way. What makes it still painful is the meta layer underneath. Readers killed Jason Todd, not the Joker, not Jim Starlin, not DC editorial. The audience chose this. Every person who called that 1-900 number participated in the death of a child, and the comics never let anyone forget it. Jason's memorial case sat in the Batcave for 17 years, reminding Batman and readers of the boy they'd collectively decided didn't deserve to live. When Jason returned in 2005's Under the Hood, his first question to Batman was why the Joker was still alive. But the question underneath was darker. Why did you let them kill me? Barry Allen. The Flash ran faster than light, faster than time, faster than anyone had ever moved, and his body disintegrated because the only way to save everyone was to destroy himself. Barry Allen died in Crisis on Infinite Earths number 8 in 1985. And what makes this death painful isn't the violence. It's the loneliness. Barry didn't die fighting a villain or surrounded by friends. He died alone inside a machine, racing against physics, with no one to witness what he sacrificed. To understand why DC killed Barry, you have to understand what Crisis was trying to accomplish. By 1985, DC's continuity had become incomprehensible. 50 years of accumulated alternate Earths and contradictory histories that confused even dedicated readers. Crisis on Infinite Earths was designed to collapse everything into one streamlined universe, and writer Marv Wolfman understood that for a reset this massive to matter, beloved characters had to die permanently. Barry had been the Flash since 1956. He represented the old continuity DC was erasing, and his death would prove that nothing was safe. The Anti-Monitor had built an antimatter cannon capable of destroying the last 5 Earths simultaneously. Nothing the heroes tried could stop it. Someone had to destroy the machine from within, and Barry was the only one fast enough to reach the core. He ran. The narration showed his thoughts as he accelerated. Every person he'd ever loved, every life he'd ever saved, every moment that had ever mattered. He ran faster than he'd ever moved, knowing his body couldn't survive the strain. His costume began to shred. His skin began to crack. He kept running. His final image was a skeleton in a tattered costume, still reaching forward, still moving, even as the last of him disintegrated. This follows a pattern in sacrificial storytelling where isolation amplifies tragedy. Barry's death would have been sad if he'd died in battle surrounded by allies, but he died alone, inside an alien machine, with only the psycho-pirate watching, and the psycho-pirate had helped build the weapon Barry was destroying. There was no one to hold his hand, no one to thank him, no one to tell him it mattered. What makes this death still hurt is how DC honored it. They didn't bring Barry back for 23 years. Instead, they let Wally West, Barry's protege, grow into the role across 2 decades of stories. Every time Wally succeeded, it was a reminder of the man who'd made it possible. Every time someone mentioned Barry's name, it carried weight because he'd actually stayed dead. When Barry finally returned in 2008's Final Crisis, it felt earned, because DC had let the absence matter. But for 23 years, readers lived with the image of a skeleton in a red costume, alone in the dark, giving everything for people who would never know his name. Supergirl. Supergirl died saving Superman, and her cousin held her body while the multiverse burned around them, creating an image so painful that artists have been redrawing it for 40 years. The cover of Crisis on Infinite Earths number 7 shows Superman cradling Supergirl's broken form, his face twisted in anguish, screaming at a sky that's already moved on to the next catastrophe. It became one of the most homaged images in comics history, and every artist who draws a hero mourning a fallen comrade is essentially redrawing that moment from 1985. To understand why DC killed Supergirl, you have to understand the editorial mandate behind Crisis. DC wanted Superman to be Krypton's sole survivor in their new streamlined universe. Multiple Kryptonians diluted his uniqueness. Supergirl had to go, not because she wasn't beloved, but because her existence contradicted the cleaner continuity DC was building. The cruelty was that she died being exactly who she was. The battle took place in the Anti-Monitor's fortress. Superman was losing. The Anti-Monitor was simply too powerful, even for the Man of Steel. He screamed in agony as the villain prepared to kill him. Supergirl heard her cousin's pain and charged. She tore through the fortress and cracked the Anti-Monitor's armor, something no hero had managed. She beat him so badly he retreated. She was winning. But then Dr. Light, an ally, called out for help, and Supergirl turned her head for 1 second. The Anti-Monitor fired a blast of antimatter into her back. Her final words were about how much she loved Superman for being good. This follows a pattern in tragic deaths, where the character's greatest virtue becomes the mechanism of their destruction. Supergirl didn't die because she made a mistake. She died because she couldn't ignore someone asking for help, even in her moment of triumph. She was winning, and she still turned to save someone else. That instinct killed her. What makes this death still painful is Superman's reaction. He didn't get to say goodbye. He didn't get to tell her what she meant to him. He just held her body while the multiverse collapsed, knowing that she'd died for him, and he couldn't do anything to repay it. DC kept Supergirl dead for 19 years, and Superman carried that loss across hundreds of issues. When she finally returned in 2004, an entire generation had grown up knowing Kara Zor-El only as the cousin who died saving the most powerful hero in the universe, and proven that sometimes love costs everything. Damian Wayne. Bruce Wayne's son died at 10 years old, murdered by his own clone, calling for a father who arrived too late to save him. Batman Incorporated #8 hit stands in February 2013, and what makes Damian's death painful isn't just losing a Robin, it's understanding what Bruce lost. This wasn't a partner or a sidekick. This was his son, his actual biological child, the boy he'd spent 7 years learning to love. And to understand the weight of this death, you have to understand Damian's arc. Grant Morrison introduced him in 2006 as a disruption, a Robin who was arrogant, violent, raised by the League of Assassins, and convinced he was superior to everyone. Readers hated him. He was bratty, cruel, and seemingly irredeemable. But Morrison spent 7 years breaking him down and rebuilding him. Damian learned heroism from Dick Grayson when Dick wore the Batman cowl. He earned respect from Tim Drake. He discovered that being Robin meant protecting people, not dominating them. By 2013, Damian Wayne had become the son Bruce always needed, a child who chose to be good despite being raised to be a weapon. And then Morrison killed him. The Heretic was a clone grown from Damian's genetic material, engineered to be everything Damian would have been without redemption. Larger, stronger, and loyal only to Talia al Ghul. When they fought, Damian had no chance. He knew it. He fought anyway. The Heretic ran him through with a sword. Damian died calling for his father. Bruce was trapped elsewhere by Talia's forces, fighting to reach his son, knowing something was wrong but unable to get there in time. When he finally arrived, all he found was a body. This follows a pattern in parental tragedy where the worst pain comes from failing to protect your child. Bruce Wayne had dedicated his life to saving others, and he couldn't save his own son. The guilt was worse than the grief. What makes this death still hurt is how DC explored Bruce's reaction. He didn't accept it. He didn't move on. He spent months trying to resurrect Damian through increasingly desperate means, traveling to Apokolips, bargaining with cosmic forces, breaking every rule he'd ever set for himself. The Batman family fractured around his obsession. Damian eventually returned because this is comics, but his death lasted over a year, and it generated some of the most emotionally raw Batman stories in decades. Bruce had lost Jason Todd before, but Jason was adopted. Damian was blood. And the death of your child, your actual child, breaks something that doesn't heal the same way. Sue Dibny. Sue Dibny was murdered in her living room while her husband was away, and the investigation revealed that the Justice League had been committing atrocities for years, proving that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you should fear most. Identity Crisis opened in 2004, with Elongated Man's wife being burned alive in their apartment. But what made Sue's death painful wasn't just the loss, it was everything the loss uncovered. Years earlier, Dr. Light had broken into the JLA satellite and raped Sue while the League was away. When the heroes captured him, they made a decision that would define how readers saw them forever. Zatanna used her magic to lobotomize Light, erasing his memories and altering his personality. The League had been mind-wiping villains who learned their secret identities. They'd done it to Batman when he objected. The heroes readers trusted had been violating minds for years, and Sue's death exposed all of it. The murderer turned out to be Jean Loring, Ray Palmer's ex-wife. She'd used the Atom's shrinking technology to enter Sue's brain and cause an aneurysm. She hadn't meant to kill anyone, just create a threat that would bring Ray back to her. But the chain of events she started revealed that the Justice League's greatest crime wasn't failing to protect Sue. It was what they'd been doing in secret all along. This follows a pattern in tragic storytelling where death functions as revelation. Sue didn't die to generate sympathy for Elongated Man. She died to force readers to confront what DC's heroes were capable of. The pain wasn't just losing her. The pain was realizing that the people who should have protected her had already crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. What makes Sue's death still painful is what it represented. She wasn't a superhero. She didn't die in battle. She was murdered in her own home by someone she trusted. And her friends, the most powerful beings on Earth, didn't even know she needed help. All the power in the DC universe couldn't save one woman in her living room. Identity Crisis changed how readers saw the Justice League permanently. These weren't uncomplicated heroes anymore. They were people who'd made terrible decisions and hidden them for years. Sue's death didn't just hurt because she was gone, it hurt because it proved that trusting heroes was never as safe as it seemed. The deaths that stay with you aren't the ones that felt earned. They're the ones that felt like something was stolen.